Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
And where I would normally be set up in that cozy little condo, today I decided, let's take the show on the road. Well, I mean, literally just down about 7 flights of stairs. Okay, I took the elevator to Condesa Coffee. That's the nice little corner coffee shop where I'm going to be doing my show from today. I do have a guest, and we have some advocates from Beltline Rail now who will be joining us, so we'll introduce them in just a few minutes. First, let's set you up with why exactly we're having a conversation so very deeply Atlanta, so very deeply mass transit. Here's the story.
Tonight, could Atlanta's mayor derail plans for train service along the Beltline? That's what proponents of the project say they're worried about tonight.
Today, Mayor Andre Dickens told MARTA leadership he no longer supports the first phase of the light rail to go on the east side of the trail. Fox 5's Rob Derienzo reports that's added fuel to an already fiery debate.
Well, that railway would go right here where I'm standing along the Beltline. Mayor Andre Dickens made that surprise announcement at that MARTA board meeting. He no longer wants it to start here on the east side.
It's the Beltline, so it is literally everybody's got an opinion about it.
And Mayor Andre Dickens' opinion is the east side of the Beltline doesn't need rail, at least for now. That's what his top advisor told MARTA leadership Thursday.
We are committed to building rail on the Beltline. However, not in the form that has been previously discussed.
Instead, the mayor wants to extend Atlanta's streetcar to reach the Beltline on the south side of the trail. It would meet up with a stop he'd like to build along the red and gold lines at Murphy's Crossing.
I'm just really disappointed because there are a lot of my neighbors who need what would have been built here.
Reed Davis would very much like to see rail service on the Beltline to better connect people who could use it to get around the city. He points out people voted to fund the project with a half-penny sales tax that was on the ballot back in 2016.
But it's been a gentrification corridor. It hasn't been a transit corridor. It hasn't connected people to jobs.
Dickens says that's why he wants to start in a lower income area.
Southside communities are the most, they have the most without cars and the most transit dependent, and we want to make sure they have the most access the quickest.
Davis says a handful of businesses along the trail have launched an all-out campaign to stop the rail line. He accuses the mayor of caving to the political pressure.
It's just a smokescreen so that he can get support from people he needs to get support from in an election year.
The multi-billion-dollar question, if they build it, will you ride?
I work from home. I don't know that I would ever need to use it. But yeah, maybe. I think it's one of those things that I won't know until it gets here.
And at this point, there's just not a clear timeline on when any of these projects mentioned during that MARTA meeting will move forward. On the Beltline, Rob Derienzo, Fox 5 News.
Again, I want to thank Fox 5 WAGA for the coverage on that story. Now, at yesterday's MARTA board meeting, both the mayor and a couple of his spokespeople were there to speak about clearing up some issues with impeding of permits at the MARTA 5 Points redevelopment. We'll dive into that on another conversation, I'm sure, at some point in time. I want you to hear what Courtney English had to say about the city's vision for MARTA in the city of Atlanta and how we're arriving at the conversation, having a conversation about where the Atlanta Beltline rail stands at this point. The mayor and his spokespeople making the surprise announcement yesterday that the connection at the East Side Trail, which is geographically closest to the current streetcar, is not where they want to go first.
All right, diving right in. So the mayor's broad strategic vision for the entire administration is to make Atlanta the best place in the country to raise a child, to make the city of Atlanta the best place in the country to raise a child. How do we get there? In order for us to achieve that vision, we have to deal with some harsh truths in the city of Atlanta. We've got to deal with some harsh truth. Just last week, something happened again that is becoming too routine in the city of Atlanta. Atlanta was rated 50 out of 50 for income mobility, or lack thereof, of major southern cities in the country. Here's what that looks like. If you draw a dotted line from northwest Atlanta to southeast Atlanta, that line is going to begin to paint a very, very clear picture about inequality in Atlanta and about what it means, who it impacts. The folks on the usually on the northern end of that line are mostly wealthy or certainly of a higher income bracket than the folks on the south. Now, the folks below that line, it's a mixed income, but it's certainly where the concentration of poverty in the city of Atlanta resides. The folks on above that line are mostly our white neighbors, and the folks below that line are mostly our African-American neighbors and our people of color. The chart to the right shows you very clearly Atlanta, unfortunately, is one of the most segregated cities in America in terms of where folks live. One of the most segregated cities in America. Now, we come together, sure, and for meetings and for gatherings and all that kind of stuff, but in terms of where folks actually live, we are, in fact, unfortunately, very segregated. That segregation comes at a price. The thing I want you to hold in your mind is this dotted line. I want you to hold another thing in your mind. That segregation comes with a price. The third thing I'll say is simply that because that these systems or this kind of segregation did not happen by accident. It was done intentionally over a course of decades, hundreds of years that have led or was caused by policies of redlining that have concentrated folks in certain parts of the community. Here's what it means for people. If you look at the number of kids living in poverty, you can clearly see a disparity between the folks on the top and the folks on the bottom. If you look at high school completion, there's another disparity. We got more folks graduating from high school. If you look at the folks who are uninsured, there are more folks below that line who are uninsured. If you look at folks who have access to internet access, there are more folks who have access to internet access above that line. If you look at rent-burdened households, there are more folks who are rent-burdened below that line than there are on top of that line. If you look at healthcare and diabetes, there are more folks who are suffering from diabetes below that line than on top of it. Any statistic that you can think about, healthcare, education, crime, says the exact same thing about our city. We could do something about it. Probably the most damning stat of all is our life expectancy gap. From Bankhead to Buckhead, or literally across that line, there's almost a 20-year life expectancy gap for folks living above that line than folks living below it. So we're talking about people's actual lives and the amount of time that they spend on this earth with their loved ones. The bottom left-hand chart shows you Atlanta's average, 76.2 years. If you can clearly see that the folks who live below that line are well below Atlanta's average. That's the cost of this kind of inequity. Moving right along. So the mayor's got a goal to address this, or a broad goal to address this, to make Atlanta the best place in the country to raise a child. We believe in order to make that vision a reality, we have to concentrate on our neighborhoods. We believe that the neighborhood is the chief engine of change inside of our cities. We believe that because our neighborhoods were intentionally segregated, intentionally starved of investment, intentionally starved of amenities, we have to apply intention to correct those types of mishaps. So we've highlighted 7 key areas in the city that we've targeted for deep and concentrated intervention. The entirety of, I'm from Atlanta, so I still say Bankhead, but for our fancy folks, we'll say Hollowell Highway. So for the entirety of the Hollowell corridor, going all the way from Northside Drive to the river, the entirety of the Campbellton Road corridor, going from Ralph David Abernathy all the way to the edge of the city, and of course downtown Atlanta, which is a major strategic focus for everybody who calls this city home, and Thomasville Heights. The poorest places in the poorest census tract in the entire state of Georgia wasn't in South Georgia, wasn't anywhere in rural Georgia. It was 15 minutes away from our state capital, 15 minutes away from Atlanta City Hall, Thomasville Heights. Also happened to be the home of the lowest performing school in the APS for 3 consecutive years. That doesn't happen by accident. The city owns or controls 121 acres of land in Thomasville Heights, as we do in these other major corridors. So we're going to do a deep dive on each one of these places, but we need transit help to make it happen. As the mayor would say, Atlanta is absolutely a group project. MARTA has participated in the past on the mayor's affordable housing strike force. This just gives you an inkling of the amount of housing activity, affordable housing activity, because we know that affordable housing is a cornerstone of a high-quality, healthy, whole neighborhood that allows people to work their way up the economic ladder. We're well on our way of achieving the mayor's ambitious goal of building, preserving 20,000 units of affordable housing over an 8-year period, with 6,500 units that have already been developed, with another 4,500 units on the way. Now, we face, when it comes turning to transit specifically, y'all have heard this, I'm sure before, the mayor just mentioned it previously, but we are in a bit of a tight spot when it comes to this ridership issue. Without intervention, we believe that we'll enter essentially a doom loop, where we've got low fare revenues, because we have low ridership, the revenues from fares will decrease, which leads to cuts in transit services, which also leads to ridership decreases. And that loop will continue on and on and on. Here's what ridership looks like year by year. By mode, heavy rail is going down, bus ridership is going down. But the line I want you to focus on is the light blue line. This is happening in a time when the city of Atlanta's metro Atlanta population is actually exploding. So that blue line represents what our population is doing versus what's actually happening with MARTA ridership. It's a long-winded way of saying people are choosing Atlanta. People are choosing the metro area, and without a partner to work with that addresses these issues, and we're going to get into that in just a second briefly, we will be creating a car-dependent society because for whatever reason, folks aren't necessarily choosing our transit system. Doesn't have to be that way. We can do something about it. Moving from the vicious cycle that we just talked about to a virtuous cycle. We believe that has four key components. One is investing in the infill stations that we've talked about. Two is transit-oriented communities, strategically located transit-oriented developments that create the community around the station, utilizing MARTA-owned land, utilizing other publicly owned land. What you are building in when you do this is you're building in your customer base. You're building in riders that will ultimately use your system, and when you do it correctly and enough, you actually reverse a lot of the inequitable trends that we talked about earlier. Of course, you all are going through a bus network redesign. Of course, we've talked a lot about BRT. We do believe that this map, we're going to spend a little bit of time here because this map looks a little bit different than the maps you've seen before. And number 4 is first and last mile connectivity. What this map ultimately represents is what we believe will create a transit system that works for all. So it takes the existing plan routes and expands them. So what you see here, ultimately, of course, you've got the bus rapid transit line on Campbellton Road on your bottom left. That's already denoted in the teal color. You've got the ART line going down Metropolitan in the dotted blue line. You've got the existing bus rapid transit line from Summerhill, and then if you see there's a spur that expands from the Summerhill BRT line down to what? Thomasville Heights. Thomasville Heights, again, is an area that we're going to deeply focus on. If you look at the top left, the corridor that we talked about, that's Hallowell Highway or Bankhead. We do want to expand bus rapid transit going across town, literally all the way, perhaps from Ponce City Market, all the way down to the edge of the city, down to Bankhead, or at least down to the Bourne Homes facility, where just last week we broke ground on 2,000 units of housing. We could talk in depth about all of the activity that is taking place across these corridors. It's a long-winded way of saying we want to build transit, or we want to work with you to build transit as these developments come online. There's some other areas of the map that are here too. We want to fix the existing streetcar. We do want to extend the streetcar to the Beltline, and then there's one area that we've never said before and never talked about it. With the mayor's permission, I'll say the thing. We are committed to building rail on the Beltline. We are committed to building rail on the Beltline. However, not in the form that has been previously discussed. We want to concentrate those resources again on fixing the existing streetcar, extending it to the Beltline, but not necessarily on the Beltline. Instead, we have identified a very specific node. We do have city-owned right-of-way to begin construction of rail on the Beltline on the south side corridor, and that is the trail that's represented by the large purple line on the bottom there. The last thing I'll mention on this chart is a potential extension of the streetcar going west to the AUC as well. And so you will be receiving all of this information in the appropriate form, which is the intergovernmental task force that we have with MARTA. We will be making these formal requests to coincide with the existing infill stations. Not going to spend too much time here. We could talk all day long about why these infill stations are absolutely important. We talked about transit-oriented communities. This just gives you an idea of the number of units right now, without even doing a deep dive, projected units that you can get from each one of these potential transit-oriented developments. 500 at Art Center, 500 plus at Bankhead, AG Homes, between 600 to 800 North Avenue, Oakland City, and then there are some additional opportunities next to where the infill stations themselves will be. We talked a lot about bus network redesign, not going to spend much time there. First and last mile connectivity. What this ultimately shows you is that if and when we create this additional transit network, this overlays our trails, our green spaces, and where our bike lanes are and or where they will be. And so in addition to building the transit-oriented communities, when we execute this particular plan, this is how it connects to all of these different modalities of transportation. Again, this helps building in ridership because we're getting more people to MARTA stations faster. Also helps increase our equity because we are attracting more density into underserved areas. We talked a lot about the Beltline. This is just giving you a deeper dive on that. Won't spend any time there. The map I want you to focus on here really quickly is what the South Side Trail or Beltline on the South Side could potentially look like. Essentially, there are a variety of nodes of activity that are already occurring on the South Side Trail. And by creating rail in this particular area, we take advantage of those nodes, not just for folks who look at the Beltline like an amenity, but also we give access to folks who are transit dependent to these existing nodes of commerce, existing or planned nodes of commerce. One is anchored by Glenwood on the far right-hand side, and then anchored by, of course, Murphy's Crossing, which we think will be one of the most transformational real estate development, affordable housing developments in the city of Atlanta's history, actually. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, one way of thinking about urbanism is a concept called the 15-minute city. It is what it sounds like. Everything's 15 minutes away, or every resident lives within 15 minutes of amenities, of a grocery, of transit, so on and so forth. Our best opportunity to create the 15-minute city is leveraging the existing Beltline. Essentially, the Beltline is 15 minutes away from everywhere else in the city because of how it's designed. And if you live on the Beltline, there's enough activity already existing where we can create that 15-minute reality, or those 15-minute connection points to amenities. We believe when we do this, we will change the trajectory of the face of the city of Atlanta. We will give all Atlantans access to live, work, play amenities. We can fix all of those horrible stats that we talked about previously. And so ultimately, that's what this plan is designed to do. It's not just a transit plan, but it's an equity plan. It's a plan to close those long-standing gaps and ultimately make Atlanta the best place in the country to raise a child. And so look forward to talking with you more about that. We look forward to your partnership and continuing the work that you all do on behalf of all of the folks who ride MARTA, but those specifically in the city of Atlanta. Thank you.
All right, so we do have a few more comments that came from the Atlanta mayor at the MARTA meeting. We'll wrap that up in the next segment. And then Matthew Rao from Beltline Rail now joins us on The Ron Show. You can follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms. That would be at Ron Show ATL. Now on Substack. I just wanted to read an article and I had to create a profile, so I did. Anyway, at Ron Show ATL, Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook. What else am I forgetting there? Oh, yeah, Twitter X, still there. And now on Substack. Mayor Andre Dickens encapsulating the surprise announcement at yesterday's board meeting at the MARTA headquarters.
Thank you all for allowing us to express those ideals and targets for the city of Atlanta. Thank you for listening to Ms. Burks talk about the 5-point station and what we want to help you and us and the city of Atlanta achieve there. We are going to be going out and around in the community and talking with MARTA and others about some of the things that was shown there. We would have probably rolled this out a little throughout the next couple of weeks and months, but because we were coming here for this presentation, we thought go ahead on and reveal some of the thoughts we have around the Atlanta Beltline. We're still open to all kinds of inputs from everybody, but light rail being on the Beltline to connect to heavy rail at MARTA at the Murphy's Crossing station, getting you all the way around to the east side, and then growing from there because South Side communities are the most they have the most without cars and the most transit dependent, and we want to make sure they have the most access the quickest as we can, and a number of other factors that we'll put in there. The infill stations are incredibly important to us. We'd like to partner with you on that. The infill stations get heavy rail to the Beltline, to these nodes that allow people to be able to have the amenities that they need quickly. So all of this, I can come back often, I can come back again. We meet all the time. My team talks about MARTA at least once a week for about 30 minutes. And this is the Chief of Staff, the COO, the Senior Policy Officer, the Chief Policy Officer and Senior Advisor, as well as the Chief Strategy Officer, who is the lucky one out of us. He's on vacation this week, Peter Amon. But all of us, and as well as our Commissioner of Atlanta DOT, we talk about MARTA all the time. We are engaged, we are committed, we're partners, and we want to remain partners. And thank you for delivering on the hopes and dreams of people to be able to get to where they're going in life via transit.
Matthew Rao from Beltline now joins us next.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Decided to take the show on the road this morning. First time I've had a chance to do this, hanging out at my literally neighborhood coffee shop, Condessa Coffee, on Boulevard in Atlanta's Old Fourth Ward. Matthew Rao from Beltline Rail got up this morning, came down, and decided to hang out with me. And I thank you for accepting the invitation at the last second. It's been my intention, actually, to always catch up with you guys. And because this is like the side hustle and not the job sometimes takes me places when Beltline Rail now is actually meeting or holding conferences or rallies or things like that. So thanks for joining the show this morning. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, Ron. And you know what they say at the Sierra Club, it's the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time to plant a tree is now.
Yeah.
So thanks for having Beltline Rail now here on the show.
Well, it's appropriate that you make that statement because I've been saying for the last few days, actually the last few months or even the last 2 years when I've been doing this show, that Atlanta's transit problems are that things that need to be done now needed to be started 20, 30 years ago. In MARTA's case, from day one, but the Atlanta Beltline project from day one in its DNA had a rail element built into it. It was very exciting. It's what really, I think, sold a lot of Metro Atlanta on the project. We've seen the Beltline in its pedestrian form roll out and how much enthusiasm there is for it on the east side. And then yesterday at the MARTA board meeting, you heard Courtney English and Mayor Andre Dickens roll out their vision for where Beltline Rail needs to go. And making the case, the case for income inequality and mobility for the neediest Atlantans, on the surface makes some sense, but that's not what they've been saying all this time leading up to now. So there's a little bit of an about face, a pivot, a whiplash effect, I think, from that announcement yesterday. And I want to get your thoughts on just what we've learned from this meeting that just came from out of nowhere, although they had prepared decks.
Well, I think they're nearly ready for that traveling medicine show to go on the road. It was slick. And like you say, Ron, it appeared to come out of nowhere, but it really hasn't.
Yeah, you don't make decks like that on the fly at the last minute.
And they finally figured out a message to wrap up a public policy based on fear. To sell to MARTA and to the public. And fear is no way to build a city. And it's the fear of connecting, really. And the Beltline is an equity-based project. It always has been. That is what sold 45 communities to give up some of their low-density zoning in favor of high-density, high-dollar development in their midst. It was that transit piece that assured them that they would get connected to the benefits and not have the downsides, which include traffic and parking. And when we go around to neighborhoods around the city, we had Let's Talk Transit with our fellow pro-transit groups, Thread ATL, MARTA Army, and Georgia Sierra Club in Buckhead, night before last. And what I heard from former NPU directors from neighborhoods up there is that the Beltline Trail is bringing lots of traffic to their neighborhood, preceding the development and the transit. So wherever the Beltline Trail goes, people follow. It's an amenity for all of Atlanta, but it was never intended to be exclusively an amenity. It was intended to be a transportation project that spread prosperity and opportunity everywhere. And connecting places on the south side to that is extremely important. But connecting those places to where that prosperity is now, that's the real meaning of equity. And building upon past progress and proving concept and going where you can go now with the money you've got now is the right public policy answer. But if you have a foregone conclusion that you're not going there, meaning the East Side Trail, you've got to come up with fancy reasons to explain why not. Because just 2 years ago, you, meaning the mayor, led the effort to start there. Let's not forget that while some of his other big public policy issues he inherited and had to decide upon, this one he created. This is purportedly the first transit mayor for the city of Atlanta. And he ran on a campaign of a lot of things, but that one of the things that included in that campaign was Beltline rail. It was in his inaugural address, and you'll be hearing his words again from that address. I don't think that Mr. English or the mayor himself gave any reason for the shift. There's not a reason we shouldn't do both. But we have the money and the investment and the readiness to do the Streetcar East extension now. We can have trains running in 3 years there. It's at least 7 to 10 years away before there's an infill station and rail on the south side. And we should pursue that, but not instead of, in addition to.
And also, the money factor has to come into play here. You mentioned having the funds now, whereas waiting later. A lot of the rationale that I heard yesterday and have been hearing from folks who oppose Beltline rail expansion onto the East Side Trail have to do with the inconvenience, the fact that the trail is already immensely popular, oft used, that there are businesses already lining up, that it's going to be an impediment for business. I understand that construction is always an impediment for business alongside where the construction is. But at the same time, that's never not going to be a problem if you kick that can down the road 7 to 10 years. And actually, it's only going to get more costly and become more of an impediment because the Beltline's only going to become that much more ingrained in those communities.
Well, exactly. And this is one of the multifaceted NIMBY arguments that exist. We're going to have some pain, therefore we should do nothing at all. And keep it a meadow. Right? So what's really lost here is that some of those businesses, and they have every right and should be concerned about the impact to their businesses during construction of anything. There was an impact to constructing the trail, but there weren't any businesses there yet.
That's right.
And there was an impact to building the downtown streetcar, and the construction of that was managed in a way that really devastated a lot of local businesses. And we don't want that, and we don't have to have that. I mean, other cities have figured out how to minimize that impact. But there is an impact, there is a short-term pain for an enormous long-term gain. And that gain includes the employees of those businesses being able to get to and from their jobs from wherever they are in this city via an all-weather, all-climate, all-ability, all-age connection that costs $2.50 from us each way from a MARTA station that already exists, not one that we have to build in the future.
Yeah, I make that point all the time, especially when the weather's pretty nasty. It's a nasty rainy day or a nasty cold rainy day or a nasty cold day or just a windy day, a nasty day of any kind where the weather says, this isn't a Beltline pedestrian kind of meander walk kind of day. Those businesses would appreciate the fact that they would still have some business on a day like that. When you mention the all-weather, to me that is the big benefit that I think a lot of folks who are detractors because they're worried about the temporary impact don't see the permanent payoff.
Yes, and and the extendability and increasing capacity of mass transit versus a paved walking trail or paved trail for micromobility or microtransit that would include autonomous vehicles or rubber-tired vehicles that travel along the Beltline. A streetcar holds 160 passengers, and in certain cases, you can couple those when you've got a crowd at Piedmont Park at a jazz festival, and you're trying to bring tens of thousands of people in and out of a place at one time. You can run that more frequently, but not interfere with cross traffic. The Beltline has lots of crossings, and those crossings aren't going away when we put transit in. And if you're crossing that every 5 seconds with a pod, it's not much of a crossing.
Yeah.
If you're crossing that every 10 minutes with a rail car, a streetcar, well, most of the time, 90% of the time, you're still moving across that crossing like that train wasn't even there.
I feel like, after listening to the mayor's words yesterday, that this is a two-pronged re-election bolstering sort of tactic on his part. Votes on the south side and campaign dollars from detractors, NIMBYs, business owners on the east side. Do you see that as well?
I hadn't thought of it in framing it that way before, but that fits the available facts. And the mayor needs to get this behind him and try to create a wedge on which to campaign and falsely pit folks on the Northeast from folks on the Southwest. Mr. English did a great job of presenting Atlanta as the city with the largest income divide in the United States. And he asked us to envision a line running from the Northwest to the Southeast yesterday. And all of that's true. And, you know, the argument here is to take a lot of essential truths and spin them around into a half-truth. The real thing we have to focus on is how to take the line, that line between Northwest and Southeast, and enable as many people to cross it as fast as possible, as comfortably as possible now. Because the reality is that people want to get to the East Side Trail. Employers want to hire people on the East Side Trail. There are 3 hotels now that didn't even exist before. Those hotels have great paying service jobs if you can fill them. Those businesses need people. They need customers. To say, let's get an Uber or on a scooter isn't a solution. We have hundreds of thousands of people downtown at shows. To disparage tourists, which are the visitors in a huge part of our tourist economy, to those shows, and say, get in an Uber to get to the East Side Trail, why would you do that?
Yeah.
When you have at hand a solution that you've already partially paid for, that you've already banked the money for, that you're ready to go with. I mean, I think that as shocked as you and I might have been, I think some of the members of the MARTA board were shocked too.
Oh, no, absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that again, it just came out of nowhere. You could see on the faces, just folks that were sitting behind the conversation as it was happening. There was a lot of surprise, and I'd love to have seen like a camera shot on the board members when this was all laid out. Again, catching everyone completely surprised. I mean, when the mayor announced infill plans last year, I don't know, I felt a little bit of mixed messaging then, but I did not see this long-term playing out to lead us towards a South Side Trail first versus East Side Trail scenario. I like the fact that you brought up the new hotels in Old Fourth Ward. I live in Old Fourth Ward. It's expensive to live in Old Fourth Ward. And I can't imagine that someone who works, whether it's a front desk concierge or a valet or, you know, housekeeping, they're not living in Old Fourth Ward. So how are they getting here for these jobs? And Uber, Lyft ain't cheap. And
neither are scooters when you rent them.
No.
If you don't own your own.
Well, and you don't want to do that in all weather scenarios either. It's very disappointing. I also worry that this is one of those scenarios where we are taking a streetcar that nobody uses right now because it really wasn't designed to be all that useful in a heavily populated area, and now going to another not heavily populated portion of the trail to create another, what appears to be a monetary boondoggle that'll just give detractors more ammunition.
So the mayor and Mr. English used talking points from the anti-transit group Better Atlanta Transit in their presentation, and one that was terribly concerning was the rewording, the Orwellian rewording of what Streetcar East means, and bringing rail to the Beltline, but not on it. So they want us to now accept that Streetcar East means extending the streetcar to the Beltline, but not going on it. And they want to extend on the west side. Those, as part of other projects, are exactly what we need to do. But building disconnected projects in different parts of town, in places where there isn't a ridership case, isn't what we need to do as the first step. It's the second step, and I hope we get to those places before we have a situation on the east side, like we have on the East Side Trail now, where people have gotten used to a situation for nearly a decade without it. And there are a lot of people attracted to the without scenario, forgetting that 71% of the city voted for the with scenario 9 years ago when Marta was a referendum.
Matthew Rao joining us from Beltline Rail Now. We'll talk more about his and his organization's reaction and what their future plans are. Maybe have a little discussion about what's going to happen with this mayoral race. He has no opposition. Will there be opposition? The Ron Show returns in just a few on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Doing the show from Condessa Coffee in Old Fourth Ward at the corner of Boulevard and John Lewis Freedom Parkway. My thanks to Anthony Montag and Rhea for setting us up here this morning. And, of course, Matthew Rao from Beltline Rail Now for joining us. So what's next? What's the battle plan? What is Beltline Rail Now looking to do? I mean, is this set in stone, or are there minds that can be nuanced and changed on city council? What's the story here? Doug Shipman was caught by surprise on this.
I think people may be shocked, but I don't think anyone who's followed this mayor and his about face over the last year is truly surprised. We're disappointed. This mayor had the opportunity really to implement Beltline Rail, and I think actually in his heart of heart believes in it, but he can't stand up to the powerful interests that have influenced him and persuaded him that backing away from building the first link of Beltline Rail is the right political move to do.
He does, by the way, seem to be more movable to moneyed interest. We saw that happen with the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility, Cop City, whereas the will of the people just took a back seat.
Well, I don't want to get into
that
whole thing. There's not time to even explore that issue. But you're making an analogy, and it seems that you just have to have the right influence and the right pressure in a generation of public engagement, public collective decision-making, funding, referendums can be erased. But you know, Ron, I don't think the mayor's a king. That's not the way our form of government is set up. And I don't think the mayor consulted with the council or with folks at MARTA.
Clearly.
I think he consulted with autonomous vehicle companies and developers. And developers are writing urban design policy right now in the city of Atlanta. And I think that's so unfortunate for our growth. There is no question that the gap between the size of Atlanta and the size of its sister cities in the South is going to grow, and Atlanta will be the mega city of the South. But what about the quality of life in that mega city?
Being stuck in traffic is not quality of life.
What about the gap that Mr. English is trying to address? We're not going to address that gap until we connect the places of opportunity to the places of need. And that's what Beltline Rail is designed to do. And so what's next? I'll tell you, I don't know, frankly. But I'd tell you this, I've never seen such an outpouring of support and that people asking us that question as I have in the last 12 hours, or 16 hours. My phone's been ringing off the hook. My email is just exploding. People want to know what we think. And I think that for those of you listening now who have supported Beltline Rail and Beltline Rail Now, you should be gratified that so many people want this project. We had over 1,000 postcards in 4 months, 5 months delivered to Mayor Dickens, posted with individual messages from all over the city of why people want Beltline Rail and why it matters. And what impressed me about that effort so much was that the average person really does understand a lot more than City Hall gives them credit for understanding. And that they understand sequence. They understand that you start one place and you get to the next place and you get to the next place. And even if your place isn't first, your place is next, but only if you start in the first place where the project needs to start. And so I'm hopeful that we will be meeting with council members. This is an election year, and it's not only the mayor who's up for re-election, it's the council. And on paper, and sometimes in practice, our council has a lot of power. They have the power of the purse, and they have the power to create tax districts. The mayor does not have that power. The mayor does not have unilateral spending authority or public policy authority. The mayor's expressed that he doesn't want this to happen. Okay, that's where we are. And I don't know where we're going next, but I promise you we're going somewhere.
Well, I know that my councilman here, Amir Faroqi, will be stepping away here soon, and there will have to be a vacancy filled there as well. So that could be a little bit of a canary in the coal mine, electorally speaking, as well, when we start to see who steps up to run for that seat. And the mayor currently has no opposition right now, but do you believe that there's room, that there is a groundswell waiting for someone to step forward and say, yeah, I'll take him on and I'll take up your plight as well?
The mayor won by fewer than 1,000 votes in a city of 500,000 people last time. So is there room? Absolutely. Is it an uphill battle? Of course. There isn't an example of a challenger defeating an incumbent mayor running for re-election in his first term in a long time, or her term. And so, yes, on the conventional wisdom is that cannot happen, but so many things that have happened in the last year, nationally and locally, should not have been able to happen. And I think this is just one more thing. The election is starting, the campaign season is starting, but there's a long way to go to November.
Have you heard, you don't have to name names, have you heard from anyone who is kicking the tires on a potential run that gives you some inclination that there will be someone to step up?
The steps it takes to really qualify are when you really take an effort like that seriously. Sure, there are rumblings that people want to do this. We heard the former city council president, Felicia Moore, publicly call and commit to finding an alternative to be in the race. And the mayor needs to justify and explain his positions on Beltline Rail and other things. And he needs to go to the neighborhoods and the neighborhood leaders and the citizens of this city and explain how his plan is going to bring them benefit faster than the plan he supported last year.
Right. All right, 60 seconds. How do folks get involved with Beltline Rail now? Will you be meeting? Will there be rally soon? What's the story?
You go to beltlinerailnow.com and you click the Get Involved tab and you sign up with your email and your phone number and we will activate you. We're going to be tabling at festivals again this year, Streets Alive, Inman Park Festival, and over the Inman Park weekend, the last weekend in April. And there are all kinds. We need some folks with great graphic design skills, great writing skills. I think what we feel is that it's time to get bigger and bolder, and the mayor has thrown down a gauntlet and said, catch me if you can. And we're going to see how we can respond to that.
Thank you so much. Matthew Rowell, Beltline Rail Now. Again, beltlinerailnow.com. For joining us today at Condessa Coffee, thank you so much, Condessa Coffee, for hosting. Show notes, as always, everything you heard, we'll have links to at ronshowatl.com. Have a great weekend. We will see you Monday, 9 a.m. on America One Radio.